Yo, what's good?
Hold on, let me hit record. So,
Yes.
do you know
Does that
what
sound good?
it's pretty loud, but yeah, okay, yeah, it sounds good. I
All
think it
right.
sounds good. Hold on, let me make sure. Audio and video settings. Check one. Yeah, okay. And then you sounded good. Say something.
Seven in the ragged tiger.
Hey now. So before we start this conversation, we need to have a conversation about what's the deal with white men.
Oh,
So the
oh,
problem the problem with white men is
yes.
that they feel entitled to opinions that they shouldn't have.
Okay. Yes, true.
So talking to this white man, and
Okay.
it's a question, it's a conversation we're having in a group of people about abortion.
Already a sticky situation, but
Right.
go ahead.
Right. Well, if it was a sticky situation, then we would need to abort. That
Ah,
said, right? You just kind of walked into it, dog.
you're right.
right.
My
So,
bad.
so it happens, best of us. So I said, you can't have an opinion because you don't have a vagina and a uterus.
Makes sense to me.
And he said, no, I can have an opinion. Who are you to tell me I can't have an opinion? I said, okay, my man. I said, okay, you can have an opinion. Got to answer me one question. What does it feel like to have a dick inside you?
Ah,
He said, I don't know. And so we went around the table, and I
mm,
asked in a very polite way to all the women, do you know what it feels like to have a dick inside of you? And not that I hang out with
I am so
whores.
glad I wasn't in this room.
Right?
Go
Not,
ahead.
and not that I hang out with whores. But the conversation that they said, what the thing that they said was, yeah, we know what
Mm,
it's like to have a dick inside of us. And I said, so you don't get to have an opinion about what happens after you have a dick inside of you because you don't know what it feels like. I said, and oh, by the way, Mr. White Man, you don't get to have an opinion about how I feel about slavery and racism.
right. Hmm.
And he said, I wasn't, because I was in London. So he was like, I had nothing to do with that. My family had nothing to do with that, blah, blah, blah. I said, can you give me some money? He says, why should I give you money? I said, because the only way that you get an opinion is if you're fucking doing something about it. That's it.
Eh,
White privilege.
White privilege, yep. Big problem, big thing. Ain't going nowhere.
No, it's
I'm
going
soon.
someplace. It's going someplace. It's gonna go someplace. We're gonna have, Jay Z is worth a. Hold on.
Yeah, Jay Z's worth $1 billion.
Hey Prince.
Free.
Hey Prince.
What's good, man?
Jay Z is worth $1 billion fucking.
That's right. That's right.
Jay Z is worth $1 billion.
Um, what about Dre?
Drake.
Dre.
Oh. Dre is worth 880 million.
So he
It
was
seemed
perpetrating a fraud.
he didn't the Beats by Dre thing didn't quite put him over as much as he thought it was going to put him over. So and Jay Z is only the fifth black billionaire in the United States,
Yeah. Yep.
right? The other guys, one other guy, well, the other woman is giving cars to you and you and you. Everybody gets cars. The other guy is
In
saying,
schools, she's
right,
doing more than that.
right.
But go ahead.
Okay. And the other guy is saying, damn, I got my white Nubian princess. How can I get black people to not hold me accountable?
Now that is a fucked up thing to say. Now that is fucked up. Oh. Oh boy. Oh boy.
I'm sorry.
Are you trying to make up for all the crazy things you said about Public Enemy? Is that what this conversation is? You, trying to fix your reputation? Is that what this
Uh,
is?
so wait. So if I just pay off the school loans, I could be with the white girl. I could be with the white girl. Yeah. Oh yeah. Fuck that. I will be paying off all of my. How much is it?
As a as a person who's
I will
had
be. I will be making the first payments.
as a person who had sex with women of various cultures, it's not that hard. You don't really need to. You don't have to pay anything for that. You really don't. You really don't. Being a black man is kind of like an aphrodisiac. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
That's not what. That's not what the Queen said about Becky with the good hair. I just.
This is the worst time in America to be a white man. I would say that.
So first of all, it's never a bad time to be a white man because
Okay.
fuck
I didn't
what
say
you
it was a bad time. I said this is the worst time, though. I said this is the worst time.
fuck what you read on Instagram, brother. If any of us could come back and be a white man with swirly hair, I'm not doing this shit again. That's just what it is. That's just what it is. And don't have nobody fool you. Don't have nobody come back and have it easier.
Who
Come
wouldn't
back
wanna
and
do that?
come back and have a leg up. You know what? I tell you what. Let me come into this world in the same economic position I was born into this world, but come back as a white man.
Right. Right.
Right? I could just, please. I've seen police officers stop little white boys that were doing the same thing that I was doing, and the police officers say, "Now you know you ain't supposed to be doing that. Go on
Right.
home." Right? Police officer gonna take me down and hold me till my parents come get me. Got to get
Right.
you on papers. Come on, man. Please. So we talking about white men today?
That's right. We're talking about white men today. Today is White Man Day in the '80s podcast.
Have on my '80s glasses. Right? I'm
Uh,
gonna put some fillers on this, and what I think I'm gonna do is I'm gonna talk with my English accent the entire podcast, and that's because I think when you look back on the '80s and you look back on what MTV and videos did for music in the '80s, it's impossible for you to have that conversation without talking about Duran Duran, that little group from Birmingham that just came and changed just the way of the world. In all of the '80s bands that came out, there was only one '80s band that was that ushered in the new round of the Beatles, and that was Duran Duran.
excuse me. Wait.
It was the Fab Five as they were known, and that was Duran Duran.
All right.
Let's get into it. Duran Duran Rio. Duran Duran Rio. Let's get into it.
Oh,
All right.
oh,
So
that was ridiculous.
first of all, a little history about Duran Duran. Right, formed in 1976 or no,
78.
78. Yep, formed in 1978, and started out as an art house project. Right. So much. Come on,
Very believable.
like this fucking podcast
Because they
didn't
weren't really
start out-
great at
like
instruments.
this
But go ahead.
podcast didn't start out as something. All right, so they weren't great at instruments, but they had perseverance, they had wantingness, and
They took good pictures.
They took good pictures, and I think that even if you go back to their early pictures, they weren't exactly great pictures, but they had a sense of style, and it was important what you were wearing. And so let's go back 1978, right? And this is Blondie is really making their big run in, and the Clash is coming to an end, and we're now moving from a moving from rock and roll, Jimi Hendrix, and you know, uh, the Eagles and everything, and we're moving into now Bowie, and Bowie's doing his spaceman stuff, and he's working with Iggy
Mm.
Pop, and then you have Brian Ferry, and then you have everyone wearing sensible shoes and sensible suits, but still with things to say, and I think that when you start to look at what England was in the 1970s and just how crazy it was economically. We knew how crazy it was economically
Hmm.
in America. When you look at how crazy it was economically in Britain, it was mirrored. Um, and so you had a whole bunch of people who were laughing at themselves in the idea of dressing up in clothes that their moms made and then being purposely androgynous and being picked up as part of culture for it. And if you take a band like Duran Duran and you take Birmingham, and so for people who've never been to Birmingham, Birmingham is like going to Pittsburgh, right? It is a
Hmm.
steel town, right? There is nothing pretty that's coming out of Birmingham, right? And then you just take this band and you take that industrial and you mix it in with everything that was coming out of London. So it's kind of like what was coming out of Philadelphia impacting Allentown and impacting Pottsville and impacting all of these Levittown and all these small towns next to Pittsburgh and all of this weirdness, and then all of a sudden you've got this interesting bunch of kids that decided that they were going to become the kings of their little nightclub, Rum Runner, and they were going to put together a band, and they were planning their tours in a very superficial way, but they were planning what their world domination tours would look like. And if Duran Duran shows us anything, it's as far as you can cast out that line, and as much as you can hold and pull, anything is possible. And I would say that it's a lot of production for their first album. This wasn't their first album. Lots of production on their first album. A hell of a lot of tenacity, a hell of a lot of luck, a hell of a lot of being in the right place at the right time.
Biggest
That's
fraud
it.
of the 80s.
Wow.
Okay?
Okay.
Biggest frauds
And Culture Club
of
doesn't
the
hold that, huh?
80s.
Culture Club doesn't hold that, right? The
Ah,
the
no,
the
no,
man
Coach
who
Club doesn't
dressed
hold
up at
that.
a woman with hips,
Coach
right?
Club doesn't. Duran Duran holds that.
Okay.
I mean,
All right.
okay. I mean, you gave us the history. These white boys coming up from the dirt. Yeah, 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 yeah. Don't
Okay. Okay.
believe the hype.
All
Okay,
right. All right. There you go.
don't
All right. All right. All right. So
don't believe it.
so then you get
Okay.
Rio, and Rio is the culmination of doing it again and again and again until you get it right, and then hitting in such a major way that you start off doing club tours and then you end up doing arenas, all in the span of two albums. How fraud is that?
Mm. I can tell you what makes them. As we go through the album, I'll point out the things that can, that justify my opinion of Duran Duran. Okay.
Well, well, and
Um.
there you go. So let's talk about Rio.
Yeah. Let's talk about Rio.
So Rio starts out. Rio starts out as a collection of songs that they had been working on, and at the time, for all you kids of the '80s, um, there was this big push to, unlike today, you have it was record a record, put a record out, do a little tour. While you're touring, you're making new material. You go back and record, you put it out, and so it was
Hmm.
very just nonstop.
Right.
And Duran Duran ends up having all of these singles, and they have all of these songs that they've been rehearsing live, and then they get a deal, and they had Girls on Film, they had Planet Earth. That really took them into Europe, and that took them into Japan. Really didn't break in the United States. right?
Right.
So very much new wave in the United States. WLIR on the
Mm.
island was playing them. They would, open up for Blondie in small clubs in New York City. We People didn't really know them, but in Japan at the same time, because they could not fly out to Japan and they couldn't fly out to Australia because it was too expensive. It was cheaper just to put them into a studio, put makeup on them, and have them mock perform and lip sync, which they thought was boring. So they started making these concept videos, right? And so this is Planet Earth, and this is Girls on Film, and all of a sudden they're big in Japan, they're big in Australia,
The
and they're
picture
starting to
you're
have this.
painting of Duran Duran
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
as these, young geniuses
Not at
is
all. Not at all. Not at all.
okay.
Not young
Let's be honest.
geniuses.
Let's be honest. Okay, Simon Le Bon was a wannabe model.
Yep.
Never had
Yep.
any. His dream was not to be a musician,
Yep.
to be an artist. His dream was to be rich and famous.
Yes.
That is what his that
Absolutely.
he has said that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I want to be rich and
Right.
famous.
Nick
And,
Rhodes wanted to collect art. John
right,
Taylor just wanted to get out of the house and not be a mama's boy. Roger Taylor never wanted to be famous. And
right.
Andy Taylor was the only one of them that actually had ever made a living as a musician.
It, there you go. They were never musicians in the first place. They never cared about music, and that is one of the things. If you when you start going through the career, you see that
Right.
because they, you
I,
know,
you know, so I think what's interesting is that you bring up a point where I'm not going to go as strong as to say as that didn't care about music, but certainly music and image and style were all balanced. Now, I think it should be told that in June 4th, right,
my brother's
2019.
birthday, by the way, June
Oh,
4th.
oh, Travis, deuces, baby. So disappointed. Oh, too soon for that song?
That's a classic.
I know,
Okay,
I know. Okay, so we're not gonna even go there or go with to the hot
right.
chick that sung on it. But
Hmm.
okay, you know, broke Travis's heart and everything. Okay, all right. So let me know if we have to edit that out, right? 'Cause
Okay.
that'll be hysterical. But um, it's June 4th, 2019, and I just bought tickets for Duran Duran in Vegas, and
Of
tickets
course.
were almost sold out at $550 a piece, and they're basically playing their new album, which came out 2 years ago, and still sold 500,000 copies.
Point being, oh, what? That does that make them relevant? You think
Absolutely
that
makes them relevant. Absolutely, they sell out. The third biggest
sell
tour,
out? That's for
the third biggest tour in 2017 and 2018.
yeah, because nostalgia sells. Everybody knows that. You know,
Biggest tours.
all of it.
This isn't the let's go see Duran Duran next week. This is a hey, let's take your paycheck and mine, put it together, and maybe we can scrounge up a seat.
Okay, flashback. All right,
All right.
flashback to this Rio album.
Yes.
This and they're shooting the videos and all this stuff. One of the things that to give them credit. All
Right.
right, they shot their videos on film as opposed to everybody else who was shooting video on videotape. So that
Exactly.
gave them it gave them a different look. It made them look like a movie. It
That's
made
right.
them look bigger than life.
Right.
It helped to to perpetuate the fraud
But
of
but
Duran Duran.
you also have to say that for all of the beautiful videos, the pastel colors, the going to Sri Lanka, right? Which
Mm,
interestingly enough, I mean, Sri Lanka is all covered in war torn. It's all fucked up now, right? But
right.
going back Sri Lanka with the elephants and everything else like that, and shooting like 5 videos in 3 days. By the way, which makes them the new Takashi 6ix9ine. 5 videos in 3 days, right? Makes
Right,
them
right.
makes them better than any trap rapper. Trap rappers get your shit up. These dudes is going out to India on little islands and shooting 5 videos in 3 days. Y'all niggas ain't working hard enough. Okay, so then you have these guys that go and do that, and what ends up happening is they shoot these videos, but there's no outlet. And so along because you can't tell the story about Duran Duran without telling the story of MTV.
Right.
MTV is
Most
begging for
definitely.
content, right?
Mm.
At this point, it's Gary Newman playing Cars, it's Air Supply, right? And it's extremely ugly people who only have a face for radio, everybody looking and saying, "Oh my God, that's what he looks. That's what Christopher Cross looks like. The dude that sings Sailing. That's what he looks like. He looks like a fucking axe murderer, right?" So now you have these guys that everybody go in, take a
So
pause.
calling Christopher Cross an axe murderer is that was said by Frank.
Right,
I did not
exactly.
say that.
So go right. Allegedly,
Allegedly, yes,
right.
allegedly looks like an axe murderer.
No, he looks like an alleged axe murderer. That's,
Right.
that's
Okay.
that.
Right.
Put
That's
the put
better.
the quotes in the right place, right? So, boy, run this by legal. So then you've got MTV that's just got no videos to play, and what do? They find these videos, and so like it or not, they bang them and they play them, and it becomes the face of MTV. It becomes everything, and not just the face of MTV for Duran Duran and their so-called irrelevance and fraudness that you give.
Yeah.
Duran Duran becomes the face of the '80s. It becomes the face of decadence. It becomes the face of spitting in the face and thumbing your nose at the British aristocrats and the move from heavy socialism into some capitalism and what that did to austerity programs in the UK. In short, Duran Duran became everything that they were thumbing their nose out of, thumbing their nose at, and in while they were doing it, they defined what MTV video should look like. Everybody had a film MTV video.
The reason Duran Duran was popular, the reason why they was able to reach the heights that they did in the 80s, because I don't think you can pull that off today, obviously. But the one of the reasons they were able to do it is because everything about them was pretty much vapid. Okay? No one
Okay.
can, I mean, if you go through the Rio album,
Yes.
other than maybe two songs, you could not tell anybody what any song is about. Because the lyrics are obtuse and can say anything, could mean anything, and all this.
That's fair enough. So let's go down it. Rio, a song about visiting the new land of America, right? That's what Rio is about, right?
Really? That's
Yeah,
what it's
that's
about?
exactly what it's about, right? It's
Really?
about their first trip to America, but that's okay because everybody thinks it's about Brazil, and that's okay, right?
Right.
So right,
Right.
right.
Yes, I'm trying to talk about America and call it Rio.
Right,
All
right,
right.
right. Oh, just because when you're again, you got to go back to they're in the Pittsburgh of the UK, a cold steel town, and here they come to America where it's bright, and there are beaches and it's sunny, and she dances on the sand. Okay, let's go back to song starts out killer bass line.
Yeah,
Killer
it's a great. I
Baseline.
mean,
One
yeah,
of the one of the top bass lines has voted by Bass Magazine and one of the most difficult bass lines. Right? It's a bass line that is played like it's on drums and it's on guitar. It starts off and the bass is very very prevalent. The beat is four on the floor. They are very reminiscent of Nile Rodgers and Bernard Edwards from Chic, right? They're
right.
very, very, very tight. And then Nick Rhodes comes in and he starts to drop off, the Jupiter 7 kind of synths, heavy layered synths on top of it. And then the one thing that made, and I'll tell you what made Duran Duran, is that they had a guitarist that refused to be classified as a guitarist, Andy Taylor. So when you listen to Duran Duran, all of the songs are guitar driven, but the guitar doesn't sound like a guitar. And that's the genius because it's all guitar driven. You've heard it. It's familiar. Its commercial has all fuck, right? But it doesn't sound like anything you've ever heard before. And that's Rio. And so Rio's got a very catchy hook, right? It's got a very catchy hook. And you're still talking about, the third single, right? It's the third single on the album. It was the third song to come out. But now, again, when we talk about this is where I think that bands from the UK, I know Culture Club was this way. I know Pet Shop Boys was this way, and another album that we'll be talking about, Tears for Fears, songs from the Big Chair, was absolutely
That's
this way.
real.
This this album breaks the the cycle of 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 putting things heavy on the B side, right, and having a
Mm.
weak A side, because this album has both a very strong A side and a very strong B side. So Rio is a song that exceptional video. People remember the video. Guys are on a boat. Guy picks up a telephone. The guy's on a boat, and then some woman, some very
All right.
sexy woman, she comes up with a tray and she gives him a telephone. Right. The
Right.
other thing that we'll talk about the other videos, but
With no wire connected to
with
that
no
phone. That's
right,
another
hey,
thing.
right, and he did it on beat, right, and they were
Right.
wearing linen. They were wearing linen on boats, right,
Right.
and what it was a great look. It was a great look, and it worked, and it was on a boat,
It
and
was
so
ridiculous. It was. I mean, I will say it worked, but it it covered the fact that you was writing a song that was basically about nothing,
right,
and you know, just look at us. That's
right,
basically what it was, and this is
that's right.
just a way for them to do that.
That
Give you
fair,
something to look at.
absolutely fair enough. That's fair enough. That being said, it was a great video to come with, and
Yeah, video was
again,
good.
it was one of the things that Duran Duran people don't think about with Duran Duran is that Duran Duran's five guys, and they had two managers, and the Barron brothers were their managers, right? And so
Yeah, I
Duran
didn't know
Duran,
this.
Duran Duran always talks about this idea that it was really seven of them in the band, and it was just two guys that was running all the business. And so these are the guys that said, "Listen, we can't afford to keep flying back and forth out. We're going to fly you out for 5 days. You're going to shoot for 3 days, and we're going to bring it back to London, and we're going to chop it up and edit it." And that's
Hmm.
why you have all the videos for like their first album. They're all just wearing different clothes, but they're still in these great locations, and they're doing these things. And so it's the
Yeah.
Barron brothers. By the way, to answer your infamous question, and we don't have to get into the Ragged Tiger, right, is their music career and their all of the fame that they had gotten. And so when you talk about seven in the Ragged Tiger, it's the seven of them handling their music career. That's why it's seven in
To
Ragged Tiger.
those who are just listening and wasn't watching my text, wasn't reading my text that that I
That's
was
right.
sending earlier,
Right.
I sent Frank a text asking if Seven in the Ragged Tiger was the worst actual album title of all time.
And now that
And
you now
I
that
think
you
it
know what
deserves
it's
a pro.
about,
I think it deserves a consideration. That's
I
all.
just okay.
Even though
So
you want to tell me what it's, I mean, okay,
okay.
that's what you think it's about. Okay,
Okay, well that's what they said it's about. But okay,
that's what they
so
said it's about.
that's what they said. So let's go on to My Own Way, right? And I think so. Here's the interesting thing about My Own Way. My Own Way is indicative of the entire Rio album, right? So one of the other things, Prince, is that the entire Rio album had been remixed, chopped up, done over again and again to make it appeal. So when the original Rio album was put out, right, the version of My Own Way was much rockier. It had more of a rock sound. It had a heavier guitar sound and everything else like that. And the first thing that when Capitol put it out, and they put it out in the States, and it didn't pop, right? Didn't have the videos yet. It didn't
Mm,
pop.
right.
So what they did is that they gave it to, I think it's David Kirschenbaum, and what he did is that he remixed everything, and he brought the drums and the bass out. He pulled the guitar back, and he gave them that sound. That's why the Rio album that you hear sounds so incredibly polished. But if you, one of the places that you can hear the dramatic differences is if you do a search and do a Google search for all of the different versions of My Own Way, the different versions of My Own Way that have come out as what they call night versions and what they call night for the club versions and what they call remixes and the 12-inch version and everything else like that, all those things are different. What ended up on the album was very, very polished, and it served as a great come down and still energy. It's a great way to come down off the energy of Rio, right? But it still had great energy to carry you in. My Own Way, spectacular song, great video. But what you'll find is when Duran
I don't
Duran,
remember that video. They had a
right?
video for that.
So yeah, there was a great video for it. Here's the thing. The thing is that when you look at the video for My Own Way, what you'll find is that the version of the video is different than the version on the album, so people don't put it together.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Right.
It's a
Because when
different
you're
thing.
talking about Duran Duran, if there's no video, there's no song.
Well,
Okay, it doesn't really. If there's no video, it doesn't really matter.
right.
Right.
And by the way, that's exactly what Duran Duran would end up being trapped in.
Yeah.
And arguably today, that's what they're trapped in today. Right?
Yeah.
It's still, how good they look.
By the way, I
Right.
think you should tell people how they got the name Duran Duran. I think
Ah.
people listening will probably want to know that.
So do you think any of our listeners would have a fuck idea what the movie Barbarella was?
I
Right.
would think they
Right.
know, but they may know
No.
of. They may have heard
Right.
of Jane Fonda. Right.
So
Jane Fonda used to be a sex symbol before she became what do you say, an activist? I don't know what you would call her. Well, she's an actress.
she wasn't a sex symbol to black people.
Well,
So-
okay, and not to Vietnam veterans either.
Right.
But that's a whole. But
So-
she was kind of considered a sex symbol to a certain
Okay,
degree.
so ladies and gentlemen, Jane Fonda is married to the guy that started CNN and the guy that owns TBS, Ted Turner, right?
But this was
that's-
before that time.
Right, but this is what she's known for, right? So there's a old campy science fiction movie called Barbarella, and the main villain in Barbarella is Duran Duran, and that's where they got the name Duran Duran.
Right.
I I just yeah.
Right. Very obscure.
Right. Nice obscure reference but I suppose in 78 I can't even imagine in 78 that people are like Duran Duran, like that movie Duran Duran. No, they weren't even doing that because the movie is just really bad and really
Yeah, the
obscure.
movie sucks.
The movie
You're right.
sucks. The movie was
Right.
horrible. So that's where
Which
they got.
kind of makes me. I see why they would decide to. But never mind. That's a whole other.
So Lonely in Your Nightmare is a slow jam pop song done in Duran Duran style, and it works.
Okay, that's a stretch. Okay, but it works.
It works. It works. It works.
I don't
And-
remember the video, so I don't
and,
think the song existed.
So the
Sorry.
video was actually filmed at the same time, right? And here's the thing that you have to remember: when the album was released, about 5 months after the album being released, they released a cassette of the videos from the album, and it was a cassette. And Duran Duran has won Grammys for those videos, for those cassettes of videos, right? So
What's
a
this
video
song
album,
about?
a video album, "Lonely in Your Nightmare."
Yeah.
Um, it is about a guy that is trying to convince a woman that she doesn't have to suffer alone and be alone, although she's pushing him back, and he's begging to just be there. You're lonely
Okay.
in your nightmare, let me in. You're lonely in your nightmare, let me in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is the problem with Lonely in Your Nightmare. They would never perform it live because no one wants to sit through that slow song. Right? Duran Duran was a dance band. They were a band that you were supposed to dance to. You can dance to Rio, albeit it's the 80s. And how are you dancing? You're dancing to Rio.
Moves
You're
were
dancing
different
to
back
My
then.
Own Way. And so Lonely in Your Nightmare ends up being one of those songs that someone says, I can probably write a slow jam. So it doesn't work. So it doesn't quite work, but it is a good place, on especially because you have a band that's so focused on how things are sequenced, right? And you know that they're focused on how things are sequenced because if you look at other pressings, songs start to move around because what works, right? And so
Hmm.
they're very very focused on that, and that goes back to your heavy focus on substance versus style, right?
Right.
And at this point, it is very much how are you going to consume it. I think Duran Duran has been so is continues to be so successful and continues to do amazingly well, right? In 2019 is because they have always been concerned with how are you the consumer consuming the product.
That's an interesting take.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's it. So, all right. So then we get to the Juggernaut. We get to the Juggernaut, "Hungry Like the Wolf." "Hungry Like the
Ah,
Wolf" is a song that should not have actually made it. It doesn't have any of the elements of a pop song, right? The lyrics are, what the hell is he singing about, right? And any lyrics that just you get away with doing a bar of do 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 do
hmm.
do do, right?
Right.
So, but "Hungry Like the Wolf" works, and the reason why "Hungry Like the Wolf" works is not because of its pop sensibility, not because of its catchy hook, not because of its disco rhythms and everything else like that, not even because of the really cheeky, the girl starting laughing, and then at the end, the orgasm and everything else like that, which,
That's the best
by
part
the
of the song.
way, me as a 14-year-old boy, I really appreciated. Hey, you're not really coming. Right, that kind of thing. I really, really fucking appreciated it. But that was "Hungry Like the Wolf." Now, I've got a story for you about "Hungry Like the Wolf."
Okay.
So Hungry Like the Wolf starts off, the story of "Hungry Like the Wolf" is real simple. Um, they come in and something falls on top of the keyboard, changes the settings, and that little annoying Casio sound that you hear through the song
Yeah.
starts to play. The sequences get sped up, slowed down, and reversed because certain buttons were hit, and then all of a sudden they said, "Wow, that sounds good." So
Really.
then they write a song around it, and the song is done. And the song is about Little Red Riding Hood, right? The song's about Little Red Riding Hood. Now, this song doesn't make it without the video,
No
and the
shit.
video is
It doesn't
the
make it
video is
without
a
the
done.
doesn't make it without the video. Doesn't make it without those sex sounds at the end of the song. It doesn't make it
Exactly.
without the girls laughing. It's the things that make that song have literally nothing to do with the actual song or the band. It's amazing.
Absolutely. And again, you could say that that's accidental, but if you say that it's contrived, then you have to give the band credit for something.
Right. I mean,
Right.
I mean, this. I will say this about the. Let me say because I've been saying negative things about the Duran Duran. Let me say something positive about the Duran Duran. I can say this. There is no band in history that sounds like them. You can't. It's very hard to copy that Duran Duran sound, and that you know, and for a band who had nothing to say and to be able to say it in a way that nobody else could is an amazing feat. And you know, and some of those songs are really good. I
Right.
mean, I jammed some Duran Duran. Everybody has, but so
I know.
they do have their own unique sound. I give them credit for that. But as a band, as
Uh,
a let's
Fair
okay,
enough.
continue. Yeah.
That being said, we think about "Hungry Like the Wolf," and I think this "Hungry Like the Wolf" was a very important song for a very, very important reason. It was in the video. There were a whole bunch of white guys, and it was
Mhm.
white guys doing white things,
Right.
and wearing white clothes, and dressing how so many of us couldn't dress, and doing that, and being places that we couldn't imagine even being. And then at the end of the video, it turns out that they're making out with a woman. All the different guys from the group are being chased by this woman. And the woman is a nappy headed, beautiful black woman.
Hmm.
And we see the tongue kissing, and we see the high energy sexuality. And this is one of the few times when you turn on MTV and you see a white man doing that with a black woman. Which, listen, I've met Duran Duran, and I've met them in passing, right? So
Hmm.
I don't There's a cocaine story I can tell you about in the late '80s, but right. So, but I've
Right.
who hasn't,
But
right?
everybody has a cocaine
Right.
story
Everybody has a cocaine
with
story
Duran Duran. Yeah.
with John Taylor. Okay, and so they're great stories to be told about them, but it it I can't say that I know them enough to say that they don't like black people, do like black people, or have an opinion about black people, or understand the
Mhm.
struggle, or whatever. Because, as you said, Duran Duran is not about political anthems,
Right.
right? They're not about let's make a song about
Yeah, they're not you too.
they're not you too, right? You know what I
Right.
mean, right? So um, but for them to make that statement, that's a very interesting thing. That's a different thing to do. That's a very very different thing to do, and it's exotic, and it is
But don't you think that's
it is
really
a
why they did it?
it's a but it's a at the end of the day it's a narrative, and it's a conversation that MTV was not having. You did not see. Remember, only a year earlier, no, only 5 or 6 months earlier, um, Tommy Mottola had to threaten to pull all of Sony's artists off of all of Columbia's artists off of MTV if they didn't play Billie Jean.
Right.
You
I
know what I
remember.
mean? This wasn't MTV's thing. "Hungry Like the Wolf" is a defining song, and is arguably one of those songs that Duran Duran has to play every single show.
Well, of course. Right.
Right. Yeah. Let's talk about "Hold Back the Rain." Right. So how do we
Another
come
hit.
off of? Well, how do we come off of "Hungry Like the Wolf"? We come off of "Hungry Like the Wolf" like "Hungry." "Hold Back the Rain." "Hold Back the Rain" is one of those songs that a whole bunch of Duran fans, they call them Duranis, right? A whole bunch of Duranis claim what is the best song that nobody ever talks about, and "Hold Back the Rain" is right there. You know,
I thought it'll be
um,
the chauffeur, but go ahead.
well, but that's the song we all talk about. So what is
Oh,
the song
okay.
that we
Gotcha.
don't talk about? "Hold Back the
Oh,
Rain" is one
okay.
of those songs that we don't talk about. Unfortunately, "Hold Back the Rain" is lazy, right? A "Hold Back the Rain" is press play on the synthesizer and then play with the phaser and everything else like that. It is a song that it's a song where, by the way, the writing of Duran Duran is that the band, the John Taylor, Andy Taylor, Roger Taylor, the Knott brothers,
Right.
that's
Not related
insane.
at all. What's his
Not
name?
related at all, right? Nick Rhodes. Um, they all get in and they all jam and they come up with these ideas, and Simon Le Bon goes and writes the lyrics, right? And then he's the pouty face. He's the one of the best lead men. He's one of the best lead men. He's up there with Steve Tyler. He's up there with Mick Jagger. He's just pouting and pruning, and he's always been that guy, right? Uh, or,
Hmm.
or or what's the guy's name from Pet Shop Boys?
Neil Tennant. But look.
Wait, Neil Tennant from Doctor Who? Oh, that's Dave Tennant. My bad. Okay, is that Dave and Neil related? Okay, all right, because somebody needs to bring in money. Um, so so it's now you got this guy Prince that is writing this music and creating this music, and he's got to create something, and that's what Hold Back the Rain is.
It's bad poetry from it's high school, middle school, high school poetry that's not that good,
Okay.
not that deep,
Oh,
not that not really much of not really much of anything, but you know. And as they say with Duran Duran, if there's no video, it doesn't exist. So
so
that's
so
something
so
pretty
so
much.
yeah, there you go. So, ladies and gentlemen, we just talked about side one of Rio, and you too can be like Prince. Go into listening to an album totally with a subjective opinion about what you think about the band, and then totally end up just not really saying anything of substance, right?
Ugh,
Which you accuse Simon Le Bon of doing, because
right.
you didn't say anything about the musicality of anything on side one. Prince, this is where
Okay, I will say this about look
this
the
is where you
band.
just didn't do your homework. Do I need to go back to the English accent?
Uh,
Do I need to start to speak in the English
there is
accent?
no homework. There is no homework to do. It's freaking Duran Duran. And the thing about their albums, all their best songs are all remixes. It's never the album cut. The album cuts always suck. It's that is Duran Duran is as I said in the beginning, they're a fraud. They they put out music. They have it remixed for clubs and things like that that we consume, but the actual work and putting together the song, they're barely they're barely doing anything, dude. They're barely doing anything. Okay, they're overrated. They have their own unique sound. I gave them credit for that. They have their own unique sound, but they're more of a marketing plan than a band. Okay, they're a marketing plan. They're not a band. They're you know
All right, all right. Well,
uh,
just a quick sponsor. This part of the
sorry.
podcast is brought to you by the Apple iPhone XMS, MX, SX Max. I think that's what it's called, right? This portion of the podcast is brought to you by the new iPhone. Go buy it because we need to empty out the stock for the Chinese so that we can build the new one that you're going to buy in December. iPhone. It's what you need. And if you don't, then you ain't about shit.
How's your privacy working on that? How's that
It
going on?
actually is really good. Did you
Yes.
iPhone? Did you see the new announcements with what they're doing
Yeah,
with
yeah,
privacy?
of
Yeah,
course.
it's
Yeah.
pretty. It makes you want to buy an iPhone, doesn't it, Prince?
Nah, let's not get carried away.
Okay,
You
well
know,
there you go. There you go.
I'm glad they finally decided to get rid of iTunes though.
Um,
About time.
okay, that's fine. All you haters need something to do, but
I'm just saying.
that's yeah,
uh,
that's get your disposable income up. So
Ouch. Ouch. That was a very Duran Duran like statement. Oh.
let's talk about new
Side
religion.
two. Right. Go ahead.
Side two. So new religion. New religion is a new religion is a fan song. It is a fan song. It is a song that the lyrics are amazing. He is talking in two voices. He's talking as a subconscious, and he's talking his little voice inside your head, and then he's talking out loud, and it's that battle, and it works. It works. They play it every single show. It works, right? It's very synth driven, right? The
Mhm.
arpeggiated sweeping guitars just work. It's a song that works, and it's a strong start to the second start of the album.
I have a Duran Duran story. All right, a quick Duran Duran story. Back when that album came out, what year did Rio come out? 1980.
1983.
Yes, 1983. All right. I at the time was living with some white girl that was 10 years older than me. Okay? And I had this thing
Wow,
for
wow, wow,
Patrick.
wait. So you were like a 13-year-old kid
No, no, I
living
wasn't
with a.
13. No, I wasn't 13. This was 1983. I had to be 17.
Sorry, my bad. Sorry, white woman.
Yeah,
Oh,
white woman. Her husband was a dentist. She was divorcing her husband was a dentist.
oh, she
But
was.
whatever.
Oh, married white woman.
Yes, married white woman.
Okay, I
We
just want to make
lived
sure.
in the French Quarter. Lived on Charter Street, a block off of Bourbon. She happened to be she bartended during at night, but I was into these Patrick. it- True story. So I was into these Patrick Nagel paintings. Okay, and I don't. If you don't know who Patrick Nagel is, all you have to do is look at the cover of Rio
That's right.
because because they ended up using Patrick Nagel paintings picture on their album cover, and I was ahead of that curve when it came out because I already had a couple of his prints. But yeah,
That's
that's
your
my
Duran
Duran
Duran story.
Duran story, showing how I was as vapid as them. As
Exactly.
right,
You know what? So listen, 17-year-old boys
yeah, with
living in the
27-year-old
South
white girls,
with
right,
that want 27 white girls that are being taken care of by their husbands that don't have the balls to come get their wives back. Be
right,
vapid like Duran Duran, Be vapid like Duran Duran.
right. I was
Yeah,
living a
that's fair.
lifestyle no one was expecting. Yeah, like Duran Duran.
Like Duran Duran. Well, right. Except you were in the French Quarter with a white girl 10 years, and at that
Yes,
age you're
15
just
years older
blowing
than me.
just
Right.
just blowing loads that you don't care about.
Ah,
A lot
right.
of kids were lost in the making of that film. Um, let's talk about
Uh,
Last Chance on the Stairway. So,
I wish I
let
still had those Patrick Nagel prints though,
that's
but that's a whole nother.
that's it's
Which is
right.
really the point of the story
It's
was those
Hank.
Patrick
By the
prints.
way, Jay-Z $70 million art collection, $70 million art
Yes,
collection. Right.
yes, I saw that.
That's what the Basquiat could get you. That's what the
Amazing,
yeah,
man.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's just
yeah, man.
amazing.
You need to collect some art, dude.
I have some art, just that nobody knows who the artists are, right? But
Yeah,
I'm
well, the art I've
I'm
seen, I wasn't impressed by, but that's a
I,
whole other story. I
well,
will not bring it up.
I'm creepingly, I'm in a very creepingly way. Hope something happens to them so I can make some money on it.
Sounds very good to me.
Right.
Okay.
You know what? People, send us your art work. If you are late stage cancer, okay. Um, Last Chance on the Stairway, right? So, Last Chance on the Stairway is my favorite song from this album.
Really?
So, yeah, Last Chance on the Stairway is my favorite song from this album. Every album, Prince, has that song that you think you're the only person that likes, so it becomes your favorite song because, and it
Yeah,
turns out that there are millions of people
yeah.
who actually like it. But if you really want to know me and you want to know what I'm into and what I listen to, so Last Chance on the Stairway is on my phone right now, and it is part of my playlist.
Oh.
It's just yeah, no, no. It's a song that just brings me back and warms my heart.
Uh, when I listened to that again for today, I had no idea what the how the song was about. Like any, like most Duran Duran
Like
songs,
most Duran Duran songs. So yeah, Last Chance on the Stairway, just a
right? Was
love
there a
song.
video for that?
It's a love song. No, there was not a video for that,
Yeah, it didn't
and
exist.
they
Okay.
don't play it live, right? And they don't play it live. So let's go on to the Juggernaut, right? The I believe it was the second single. No, it's the third single. Sorry, from so it was "Hungry Like the Wolf" Rio, and then it was "Save a Prayer."
Mm.
Now, "Save a Prayer" is one of the all-time great slow songs, right? It is just
For
it
that era,
just
yeah,
works
it's a good
for
song.
that era. It just works. It's everything keyboardy. It's funny enough. If you go look at
It
the
will
video,
match it.
it's "Hungry Like the Wolf." What happened the next day, and everybody's in slow mo, and it is one of the first times that we saw Simon LeBon pick up a guitar and play the guitar, right? And I don't think Simon LeBon was a guitar player at the time, but it worked.
Can
But it
Simon LeBron
worked.
really play the guitar? No.
After 40 years in the band, you probably can.
Oh, you think so? Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah, absolutely. After please, I mean anybody. Again, I think I saw Little Zane sit down at the piano and play like Chopin and shit. All right. Right? And
uh,
anybody can.
Old Town
So
Road.
yeah, "Save a Prayer" was a great. "Save a Prayer" was
Yeah,
an
that's a
amazing
good
song.
song.
It's just an amazing song, amazing video, and "Save a Prayer," like a lot of these early '80 albums, were one of the we talk about sequencing, and the reason why sequencing is so important, Prince, is because we grew up in an era with cassette tapes, right?
Right.
And the 60-minute Maxells, right? Because no bitch was worth 90. The 60-minute, right, it ended up being just about 29 minutes and 30 seconds each side, right? Because you had the leader, right? And they counted the
Right.
leader.
Hmm.
And so that meant sequencing was really important. That meant that you had to make sure that you were stopping and starting, and you had to make sure that you didn't want to cut, and you were trying to tell a story. We used to, back in the day, we used to give, people that we were thinking about going through something, girls that we wanted to get with, we used to give them mixtapes, right?
Right.
We
Of
used to take
course.
the little felt pens and fill out the side, and then we would draw it in and make it so that when you walked into a chick's room, right? Because I done walked into many chick's
Hmm.
rooms, and I look up and I see the tapes, and I'd be like, "Oh, this nigga was here. Oh, this nigga was here too. Oh, this nigga was here too." That's what we did, right? Um, that's why "Save a Prayer" was important, because if anything, it made sure that you drove the point home of what you wanted from this person. And then finally is "The Chauffeur," and the chauffeur was one of those music videos that did not have Duran Duran in the video. So Duran Duran is not in "The Chauffeur," but what you do have is naked lesbians. And that's okay for a 14-year-old
Right.
Frank. That's okay
Hmm.
for a 14-year-old Frank, right?
Right.
Who
Right.
with a VCR in the living room. So, thank goodness my parents didn't accidentally come home during the day because they would have saw some horrific things happening on their plastic wrapped furniture with on the big
God.
TV in the house,
Right.
right?
Right.
With just a ton of Vaseline waiting for, and let me tell you something.
We
Let me
don't
tell you
need that
something.
visual.
Listen. A nigga could be like this with the remote. Nigga knew. Nigga knew. You know what I mean? Just knew when to put that shit. Listen. To this day, I can time an orgasm with a commercial on a television. So the
You know what
chauffeur.
I like about Duran Duran?
What do you like
Oh,
about
I'm
Duran
sorry.
Duran?
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. What do you like about Duran Duran?
I like Duran Duran when they weren't Duran Duran. You know what I'm saying? You know,
Power station.
love the power stations. I
Arcadia.
love that whole power station sound.
Right.
That was a great sound.
Right.
Which who was it in that group? Who didn't make the
So,
cut into the
so,
power station?
so the power station was John Taylor on bass, Andy
Right.
Taylor on guitar, right? But
Hmm.
it was Tony Thompson on drums,
Ah,
right? And the album was and it was Robert Palmer
right. Robert Pope.
on vocals.
Wait.
But what's important is that the album was basically produced by Bernard Edwards and Nile Rodgers,
Right.
right? So the power station was amazingly powerful, but it was as impactful because the power station belongs on that shelf because it has the same players as Diana Ross, Inside Out, as Sister Sledge, We Are Family,
Mm,
has Good Times, right? Has
right.
Like a Virgin, has Let's Dance, has Bring Me a Higher Love, right? And
Mm,
even if you go back, it's the same story. It's that same energy as even a Daft Punk, um, Get Lucky, that kind of stuff.
right. Yeah,
All
you
of
could
the,
feel it.
Right, it's that same energy, and that was the power station, and in fact, today what you'll find is that um, uh, what Duran Duran has done is they don't have a guitarist anymore. They have a guy that's playing Dominique Brown, who's playing guitar for them, touring guitarist. But they'll get into the studio with Mark Ronson or Nile Rodgers on guitar, and that will give them that relevance. And what Duran Duran has done, and this all I agree, Duran Duran ended up using movies like James Bond, right, like The
Hmm.
Saint, right, because they
Right.
did the soundtrack to The Saint. They will end up using um, they will end up using everything from new ways of making music videos. They were the first They were the first music artists to have an all flash video, right? So
Hmm.
their video for someone else, not me, is was filmed all in flash. They were the first band to have a truly electronic press kit, and that's what they're doing. So Duran Duran was
Hmm.
very much ahead of the time, right?
Right. Because they
And
didn't
that's
care
what I'm
about the
saying.
music. But that's
Okay,
a whole
well,
nother.
there you go. Well, okay, so Rio, that's the Rio album, right? And again, the Rio album, I think, again, is incredibly important when you are doing the research and you're doing the details on Duran Duran. You have to listen to the Rio
Well,
album.
of course.
So
And the
it's not even
album,
listen to the singles. You want to listen to the album to really get the idea of what Duran Duran was all about.
I mean, like I said before, I mean, they do have their unique sound, and I give them credit for that because I mean, that's very important. My problem with Duran Duran is that they never had anything to say. They literally, their whole career, they had nothing to say. You know, their songs, they, if you look back at the songs, there's no continuity. There's just, just a bunch of sounds. But
It's I think so to
and I
be
know
inter-
you're a big fan. I know you're a big, and I
it'll be
don't mean to.
no, not at all. I think it'll be very interesting because when we're all gone and you start to look at bands and what they did, I think Duran Duran has lasting power, not just the music, but what they did in terms of changing, disrupting the music this much, so that videos became incredibly important. Videos became a lead. Um, Unfortunately, what they won't get credit for are some of the more brilliant things that they did musically, right? And there are a lot of bands that are like that. There are a lot of bands that like that. We talked about on this podcast, as we talk about albums, we talk about Aha, and
Right.
you talk about Aha as a band that can continue to play stadiums, until as recent as that. I think their last tour was maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, right? And we all know them for Take On Me, but just brilliant musicality going through.
And they couldn't
Kraftwerk,
speak English.
right? And they
Right.
couldn't speak English, right? Norwegian, right?
Right.
Kraftwerk still isn't in the Hall of Fame, in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I don't know how that happens, right? Because
Right.
without Kraftwerk, you have no Duran Duran. Without Kraftwerk, you have nothing coming out of England. And without Kraftwerk, you don't have African Bambaataa. You don't have one third of hip hop.
Right. Right.
So I think bands, when you look back, what they add to the popular culture, um, we may not be at a time that we can see it. But I can say this from my perspective: if you want to know what the '80s were all about, you cannot have a podcast and talk about what the '80s were all about. And you can talk about Prince, and you can talk about Bruce Springsteen, and you can talk about Madonna. But if you talk, you have to have in that conversation
Right.
Rio, right? So
Yeah,
that's
you have
why
to. Yes.
Rio, thumbs up. Prince,
It's required listening. I will say that.
exactly.
But how come we never mentioned Arcadia? How come we never mentioned Simon Le Bon's Simon Le Bon's album band that he put together? And
Well,
that
so we can talk about Power Station, right? So
Power Station was awesome. I
Power
love it.
Station took Andy Taylor and John Taylor, right? Arcadia
Right.
took Roger Taylor, Nick Rhodes, and Simon Le Bon, right?
Right.
Arcadia, So Red the Rose, amazing album. Grace Jones, Sting,
Dude, I
just
bought that
amazing.
album.
Yeah, it's a
I bought
great album.
that album the day it came out.
Yeah,
Okay? I remember I still remember to this day because it was an actual album.
right,
Okay?
right,
That I purchased. All right? And I remember listening to it with my brother, being very disappointed that I had spent
right.
however much albums cost back then. I remember like, oh man, I really wish there was more than one hit on this song.
So this
I
is it.
forget what the hit was. What's the hit record off that song?
Election Day.
Yes, Election
Election
Day.
Day.
Yeah, right.
So
Election.
one of the things that
Ugh.
you have to look at. So one of the things about Duran Duran is that you've never had a career. Duran Duran's career was this, so much of this, right? So Arcadia is this,
Right.
right?
Most
Seven
deaf.
and the Ragged Tiger was coming down, but they had the Reflex, which
Right.
only
The
made it on
reflex
the
is
remix,
classic.
right?
Right.
And that's another '80s album that you can talk about.
Yeah,
But
that's true.
that's the fall, right? So Rio is here, Seven and the Ragged Tiger is here, Arcadia
Mhm.
is here, but then Notorious is right here,
Right.
and then it
Yeah.
goes down to All She Wants Is, and some of the weird dance stuff, and then it comes back
Right.
up eventually to the wedding album, where you have Ordinary World and Come Undone, and all of a
Come
sudden Duran
Undone is a
Duran's
great song, by
it's
the
just a
way.
great song. And
I
then
really love that song.
they fall into obscurity with Medezaland, and they fall into obscurity with, they did a remake of Public Enemy's 911 is a joke, and
Right. Which
that's
is
right,
so.
that was weird, right? It's
Yeah.
just weird, right? And then they come back up, and they rise again with Astronaut, because they get back together, and it's a great album, and Reach Out for the Sunrise, and then they fall off down, perfectly down like I'm touching my
Hmm.
leg, with an album that they decided to have Justin Timberlake and Timberland produce, Red Carpet Massacre. So
Okay.
if you want to say Duran Duran doesn't sound like anything, go listen to Duran Duran with Timberlake, with Justin Tim, with Timberland going in
And
the background with the right, when he's right. And then of course they redeemed themselves with the last two albums, all you need, and Paper Gods. And Paper Gods is just as amazing and as impactful as Real was. So big Duran Duran fan, and but to that, I understand. I can, Duran Duran is an example of a band that you can look at over a span of time, that that starts off as one thing, and then somewhere along the line start to believe it, and then somewhere along
Right.
the line lose faith in it, and then somewhere back say that, oh, this whole thing was meant to be. And that's a career. That's a career. That is kind of, it isn't the linear movement that, let's say, a Depeche Mode makes, or it isn't the slow and steady mediocrity of Pet Shop Boys, right? Or the slow decline of Tears for Fears. So there it so there you
Uh,
so there you go. These are our opinions and the opinions of the adult education um, podcast. And if you agree with us, let us know. If you disagree with us, um, let us know too. Either way, just subscribe. Subscribe wherever you get podcasts. If you get, by the way, now you can get podcasts separately from the iTunes app. So you can get, don't look for us on the iTunes app, because by the time this comes out, iOS
yeah, right.
13 is the thing. Look for us on the podcast app, right? Or wherever
Yeah.
podcasts are sold. Or if Spotify or Pandora come by and do the right thing, then fuck them people. We are
Yeah, yes. We
right.
believe in
Then
sign exclusives, right?
then right, right. Exactly. Shout out to Spotify. All right, let's cut the second part.
All right.
Shout out to Pandora. All right. All right, hold on.
Right. Give Title some
Apple
love.
Music. Shout out to Jay-Z and Tidal for making $1 billion. All right, did I leave anybody
Oh,
out?
that's good.
Yeah,
That's
I
good.
didn't think I leave out, right?
Yeah,
And then
thank
also
you.
Squarespace, because help us pay our bills. We're
Amen.
going to design our website via Squarespace. And
Yeah, right.
a whole crack team of people we hired on Fiverr for $25 a gig. Right?
Right.
So
Oh
that's
man.
who's designing our website. So there you go, Prince.
Right. Some Bangladesh kid. But
Oh, no. Karachi. We don't
my
fuck with
bad.
Indians. They steal the IP. Stop. You know,
You're right. You're
we
right.
don't want
You're
the
right.
IP stolen. We're gonna go to Karachi.
That's right.
These
That's
are
right.
different things, right?
Ah,
Right.
that was an interesting article you wrote, but can we talk about that? I guess not.
No,
Yes, no,
no.
no.
That's a whole
Okay,
nother side. Whole nother
gotcha.
side. A whole
Understood.
nother side. Right. But
Uh,
if people can find it, then people can find it. Thank you, Prince. Till next time.
all right, dude. Later.
All right. All right, man.
Was that a bad story I told? Good lord.
No, it helps